Early morning sunlight fell across the large glass windows of the security company headquarters. Employees were arriving, flashing their badges at the turnstiles, walking with the kind of confidence that came from believing their title meant everything. Among them were a few mid-level managers who had built their reputation less on kindness and more on arrogance. To them, the badge hanging on their chest was not just identification, it was a symbol of power, a pass that made them feel untouchable. These managers often walked through the office halls with their chins high, talking loudly, ignoring those they considered beneath them. The receptionist at the front desk, the janitors pushing their cleaning carts, the drivers waiting patiently in the parking lot, they were barely noticed. The managers liked to remind others of their authority by dropping phrases like, "You know who I am here," or "I don't need to explain myself. I have the badge." That same week, a new face had been seen around the building. Marcus, a tall black man with calm eyes and a quiet smile, carried files from one department to another. He spoke little, kept to himself, and didn't try to stand out. He seemed respectful to everyone, from the front desk staff to the cafeteria workers. People who noticed him assumed he was just another new hire, maybe a mid-level supervisor at best. The group of managers quickly dismissed him. One of them chuckled in the lounge, saying, "That new guy doesn't look like he'll last long. Doesn't seem like he knows how things work around here." Another smirked and replied, "Some people are lucky just to be in this building. They should be grateful, not act like they belong in leadership." They laughed together, not realizing how wrong their assumptions were. Marcus heard some of these comments as he walked past, but he didn't react. Years of experience had taught him that people often revealed their true character without realizing it. Instead of snapping back or defending himself, he stayed calm. He focused on observing how people treated one another, who carried themselves with kindness, and who used their badge as a shield of arrogance. The manager's behavior wasn't new in this company. They were known for making interns uncomfortable, giving janitors a hard time, and even ignoring the contributions of younger staff. They had grown used to being untouchable, believing their role and title gave them the final word in every situation. What they didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just a newcomer wandering the halls. He was quietly preparing for something much bigger. Behind his calm demeanor and simple presence was a man who had worked hard, studied harder, and proven himself in roles where respect was earned, not demanded. At lunchtime, Marcus chose to sit in the cafeteria with employees that most managers overlooked. He asked about their families, their work, and even thanked the cafeteria staff for the meal. His easygoing nature made people feel comfortable. A janitor who often got ignored by others found himself smiling when Marcus greeted him warmly and asked about his day. Still, the arrogant managers noticed Marcus's humility and mistook it for weakness. They whispered that he lacked ambition and wouldn't survive in the fast-paced, competitive environment of the company. One of them even waved his badge while passing by Marcus, muttering, "This is what gives us power here, not small talk." But Marcus knew something they didn't. In just a matter of hours, the truth about who he really was would shake the entire office. The day carried on as usual, with the managers believing they were in full control. They barked orders at junior employees, dismissed suggestions from others, and strutted around as if the company belonged to them. Marcus, however, remained calm, quietly preparing for the meeting that would change everything. He thought about his own journey, the long nights of study, the difficult projects he had managed, the challenges he had overcome. He remembered the times he had been underestimated, the times people looked at him and assumed he wasn't capable. Those moments had not broken him. Instead, they had built him. And now, standing at the edge of a new chapter, Marcus carried himself not with arrogance, but with quiet strength. The managers couldn't see it yet, but they were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. For all their pride in their badges, their laughter at others, and their blind arrogance, the truth would soon humble them. The first part of this story sets the stage, a workplace where arrogance has grown unchecked, where people confuse authority with respect, and where the arrival of one man calm, kind, and quietly powerful is about to reveal how wrong they are. And so, the stage was set. The arrogant laughter in the lounge, the dismissive comments in the cafeteria, the waving of badges, all of it was about to come crashing down when the truth was revealed. The next day began with the same routine. The managers entered the building with their usual pride, flashing their badges at the security gate as though the piece of plastic gave them a crown. They walked past the receptionist without a glance, ignoring her cheerful good morning. Their polished shoes clicked across the marble floor, each step loud and commanding. To them, it was another ordinary day where they were in charge, untouchable, and above everyone else. Marcus arrived shortly after, walking calmly with a small stack of files tucked under his arm. He wore a simple shirt and tie, not flashy, not loud. He greeted the receptionist kindly, thanking her for the smile she offered. He moved through the hallways with quiet confidence, greeting staff from every department, people who often went unnoticed by the very managers who carried themselves like kings. Later that morning, the managers gathered in the staff lounge. They were sipping coffee, laughing at jokes only they found funny. One of them leaned back in his chair, waving his badge dramatically. "This," he said proudly, tapping the badge on his chest, "is what makes people respect you. You can walk anywhere in this company and everyone has to step aside." Another manager chuckled. "Yeah, especially the new guy. What's his name again?" "Marcus. He walks around like he belongs, but let's be honest, people like him should be thankful just to be inside this building." The others laughed, nodding in agreement. None of them noticed that Marcus had quietly stepped into the lounge to return a file to the shelf. He heard every word but kept his expression calm. Instead of reacting, he simply placed the file in its place and walked out with the same quiet grace he always carried. Inside, however, Marcus felt the sting of their arrogance. He had heard this tone before throughout his career, through different jobs, in many rooms where people judged him before they ever gave him a chance. But he had also learned not to let such moments define him. He knew something the managers didn't: the world was about to shift, and their arrogance would soon be replaced with silence. By lunchtime, the cafeteria was buzzing with employees. Marcus chose a seat at a corner table with some of the janitors and cafeteria staff. They were surprised at first, not used to someone in formal office clothes joining them. Marcus smiled warmly, asked them about their families, their weekend plans, and even complimented the meal that had been served. The staff relaxed, enjoying the simple kindness of conversation. At another table across the room, the managers noticed him. They smirked and shook their heads. One of them whispered, "Look at him, sitting with the workers. Doesn't he know how to move up in this place? You don't waste time with people like that." Another replied, "He'll never make it far. Too soft. Too ordinary." Their words dripped with arrogance, yet Marcus didn't care. He knew real leadership was not measured by who you sat with but by how you treated people. He had built his entire career on respect, not on showing off. That afternoon, an email circulated through the office. It announced a mandatory meeting for all managers and department heads. The subject line read, "Leadership Restructure and New Regional Director Introduction." The managers quickly assumed it would just be another routine meeting where they would nod politely, leave with more authority, and return to business as usual. None of them had any idea what was about to happen. When Marcus received the email, he smiled slightly. He closed his laptop, took a deep breath, and prepared himself. This was the moment he had been waiting for, not to embarrass anyone, not to take revenge, but to finally step into the role he had worked so hard for. The managers, meanwhile, carried their arrogance into the conference room. They laughed and joked as they took their seats, boasting about their influence and how people outside the company envied them. "Untouchable," one of them said with a grin. "That's what we are. Nobody can question us here." As the clock struck the hour, the CEO walked into the room. The chatter died down, and all eyes turned to the front. The CEO cleared his throat and began speaking. Thank you all for coming. Today marks an important step in this company's growth. We are restructuring leadership in this region to strengthen our operations and improve the culture we uphold. I am proud to introduce our new regional director. The managers sat up straight, eager to see which one of them might be promoted or which new outsider they would have to dismiss. Then the door opened, and Marcus walked in. He was no longer in his simple shirt and tie. He wore a tailored suit, his posture tall, his steps confident. His calm smile carried a quiet strength that immediately filled the room. The managers froze. Their smirks vanished. Their eyes widened in disbelief. The very man they had mocked, ignored, and dismissed as ordinary was now standing in front of them as their new boss. The CEO continued, Marcus brings with him years of proven leadership experience, both in this industry and beyond. He has led successful projects, improved workplaces, and shown the kind of integrity and vision this company needs. We are fortunate to have him guide us into the future. The room fell silent. The managers shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, each replaying the moments they had laughed at him, ignored him, or treated him with disrespect. They could not hide their shock, and they could not change what had already been said. Marcus looked around the room. He could see the disbelief in their faces, the regret already beginning to form. But he did not gloat. Instead, he simply smiled and prepared to speak, knowing that his first words as their leader would set the tone for everything that was about to follow. The lesson was clear, the badge they clung to so proudly did not make them untouchable. Respect, humility, and true leadership did. And Marcus was about to show them what that truly meant. The conference room was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. Every manager sat frozen, their earlier confidence gone, their badges suddenly feeling lighter than ever before. The shock of seeing Marcus walk in as their new regional director was something none of them had prepared for. Just an hour earlier, they had been laughing at him, treating him like an outsider. Now, all eyes were fixed on him, waiting to hear what he would say. Marcus stood at the front with calm dignity. His suit was sharp, his presence strong, but his tone was warm when he finally spoke. Good afternoon, he began, his voice steady and clear. I know some of you may be surprised to see me here today. But I want to start by saying this, I didn't come here to point fingers. I came here to work with all of you and help this company grow. The managers exchanged uneasy glances. Some shifted in their chairs, others looked down at the table. They were embarrassed, but they couldn't leave. They had to sit and listen. Marcus continued. He shared a little about his journey, how he started at the very bottom years ago, working jobs where no one cared about his name, only the work he could do. He explained the struggles he faced, the late nights he spent studying, the projects he took on that others had refused. I learned very early that respect is not something you wear on your chest, he said, glancing at the badges each manager held so dearly. It's something you earn with how you treat people. One of the managers swallowed hard. His face turned red as he remembered the arrogant words he had spoken about Marcus just hours earlier in the lounge. Another manager fidgeted with his badge, suddenly realizing how meaningless it seemed compared to the weight of Marcus's words. The CEO smiled proudly as Marcus spoke. He had chosen Marcus for this role not only because of his qualifications but because of his character. He knew Marcus could change the culture of the workplace, which had long been clouded by arrogance. Marcus walked slowly around the table as he spoke. This company has great potential. But potential means nothing if we don't treat every person here with dignity, from the person at the front desk to the people who sweep these floors at night. Every role matters. Every human being matters. His words hit like a stone dropping into still water, creating ripples in the minds of everyone present. The managers felt a weight of guilt pressing on them. They thought of the times they had dismissed others, laughed at them, ignored their greetings. They had believed their badges made them untouchable. Now, sitting before Marcus, they realized they had been wrong. Marcus didn't raise his voice or use harsh words. Instead, he used calm strength, showing them what real leadership looked like. "I am not here to control you," he said. "I am here to guide us, together, to a better future. But make no mistake, our culture must change. Respect must come first." There was silence in the room, broken only when one of the managers finally cleared his throat and muttered, "You're right." Others nodded slowly, some too ashamed to speak. After the meeting ended, whispers filled the hallways. Employees who weren't present heard the news quickly. Marcus, the quiet man everyone overlooked, was now the regional director. Some staff smiled, remembering the times he had greeted them kindly. The janitors whispered to each other with pride, "That's the man who asked about my family yesterday." The cafeteria staff felt grateful, recalling how he had thanked them for the food. The managers, on the other hand, left the conference room in silence. Their usual swagger was gone. For the first time, they walked through the halls without loud voices or arrogant jokes. Their badges hung heavy on their chests, no longer symbols of pride but reminders of how wrong they had been. Marcus returned to his office later that day. He sat by the window, looking out at the busy street below. He thought about the meeting and the expressions on the managers' faces. He knew change wouldn't happen overnight. But he also knew this was the beginning of something new. He was determined to lead with respect, and he believed that, in time, even the arrogant ones would learn. That evening, as the building grew quiet and the last employees left, Marcus walked through the halls once more. He stopped to thank the cleaning staff, who looked surprised but grateful. He paused at the receptionist's desk and wished her a good evening. These small acts carried more weight than any badge ever could. For the managers, the lesson was clear. They had thought themselves untouchable, but reality had humbled them. The man they mocked had become their leader. And though the shock still lingered, they could not deny the respect Marcus commanded, not through fear, not through power, but through dignity and kindness. The story was no longer about badges or titles. It was about true leadership. And Marcus was just getting started. The first week after the big announcement was like a storm that had shaken everyone, leaving the office strangely quiet. The managers who once carried themselves with loud confidence now walked the halls carefully, their usual arrogance softened. They still wore their badges, but the meaning of those badges had changed in their minds. They were no longer untouchable, they were now accountable. Marcus, sitting in his new office, knew the hardest part was not being named regional director, it was proving that leadership meant more than titles. He believed that a leader had to guide, not dominate. He also knew that if the company's culture didn't change, its future would be weak. So, he began his work with patience, determination, and a clear vision. On his first official day, Marcus called a meeting not just for managers but for every department. Receptionists, cafeteria staff, janitors, security guards, junior employees, and managers all gathered in the main hall. It was unusual. Normally only higher-level staff were invited to such meetings. Many employees were nervous, unsure why they had been called. The managers shifted uncomfortably, realizing their old way of working would not continue under Marcus. When Marcus stood before them, he didn't stand on a raised platform or behind a large podium. He stood among them, on the same level, his voice calm yet strong. "Every one of you matters," he said. "This company is not built by titles or badges. It is built by people, each one of you who shows up every day, whether you are answering phones, serving meals, cleaning floors, or managing teams. From today forward, respect will not be optional. It will be required." The words struck like lightning. The janitors, often invisible to others, looked at each other with wide eyes. The cafeteria workers smiled quietly, almost in disbelief. The receptionist held back tears, knowing she had been overlooked for years. And the managers? They sat silently, humbled, realizing the culture they had created was being rewritten before their eyes. Marcus introduced new practices. Every department head would now spend 1 day each month shadowing lower-level employees to understand their challenges. Feedback sessions were opened where anyone from the front desk to the boardroom could voice concerns or suggestions. For the first time, people felt like they had a voice that mattered. Of course, not everyone adjusted easily. Some managers struggled with their pride. One in particular, Thomas, had been among the loudest voices mocking Marcus earlier. He now had to sit in meetings where his arrogance no longer gave him power. At first, he resisted, speaking less and rolling his eyes at the new changes. But when Marcus assigned him to spend a day with the cleaning crew, his perspective began to shift. Watching how hard they worked, how little recognition they received, and how much pride they still carried in doing a good job, it humbled him in ways no lecture could. The office atmosphere slowly began to transform. People smiled more. Employees greeted one another regardless of rank. The receptionist, once ignored, now received good morning from managers who had never spoken to her before. The cafeteria staff were thanked daily for meals. The janitors were offered appreciation for keeping the building spotless. And behind all of it was Marcus's steady leadership. He didn't shout or demand. He led by example. He was the first to greet people in the morning, the first to thank staff for their work, the first to admit when he didn't know something and ask for help. His humility became a mirror, showing others that strength came from kindness, not arrogance. One afternoon, Marcus gathered the managers privately. They sat around the table, quieter than usual, waiting for his words. Marcus looked at each of them and said, "I know some of you doubted me. I know some of you said things that you regret. But I am not here to hold your past against you. I am here to see what you can become. If we work together, we can build a place where people want to come every morning, not just because of a paycheck, but because they feel respected." A silence filled the room. Then, to everyone's surprise, Thomas, the manager who had mocked Marcus most openly, spoke up. His voice was low, almost ashamed. "You're right. I was wrong. I thought a badge made me important. But yesterday, when I worked with the cleaning crew, I realized they carry more strength than I do. They work without recognition, and I spent years thinking I was above them. I'm sorry." Marcus nodded gently. "It's not about the apology," he said. "It's about what you choose to do next. Change is possible for anyone willing to try." In that moment, something shifted in the managers. They realized Marcus wasn't there to humiliate them or take revenge. He was there to guide them toward becoming better leaders, better people. Over the weeks, the change became visible. Meetings were no longer filled with arrogance but with real collaboration. Managers began to listen more and speak less. Employees who once felt invisible started offering ideas and solutions. Productivity rose, not because of pressure, but because people felt valued. For the first time in a long while, the office became a place where people walked in with pride, not false pride from a badge, but genuine pride in being part of something meaningful. Marcus knew there was still more work to do, but he could already see the difference. The company was not just changing policies, it was changing hearts. And he believed that when respect and humility lead the way, success always follows. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, the company became almost unrecognizable compared to how it had been before Marcus took charge. The halls, once filled with arrogance and loud voices, now carried a calmer, friendlier energy. Employees of every level, whether they wore a badge or carried a mop, greeted one another with respect. It wasn't forced, it was genuine. People felt they belonged, and that shift changed everything. The managers who had once thought themselves untouchable were no longer the same. Their arrogance had been replaced with humility. They had been given a mirror to see their past behavior, and they couldn't ignore it. Though guilt still lingered in their hearts, they used it as fuel to do better. Some even admitted openly to their mistakes. One afternoon, a manager walked up to the receptionist, who had been invisible to them for years. He looked her in the eye and said, "I owe you an apology. For too long, I never even noticed your kindness. But I see it now. Thank you for always greeting us with a smile." She was so surprised that tears welled up in her eyes. It was a small moment, but it symbolized the bigger transformation happening across the company. Marcus, from his office, noticed these changes with quiet satisfaction. He didn't boast or take credit. Instead, he kept reminding everyone that the real measure of success was not just profit or numbers, it was the culture they built. He believed strongly that if people felt respected, they would give their best, and the company's success would follow naturally. One day, the CEO visited Marcus's office. He looked around, impressed by the reports of rising productivity and employee satisfaction. "Marcus," the CEO said, "you've done more than restructure this place. You've changed its soul. I always knew you had the experience, but the way you've reshaped this culture is remarkable." Marcus smiled humbly. "I didn't do it alone," he replied. "People just needed to be reminded that respect isn't a bonus, it's a necessity. Once they saw it, they embraced it." The CEO nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. Leadership isn't about being feared. It's about being followed willingly. And people are following you, Marcus, not because they have to, but because they want to." Meanwhile, employees began to tell stories about Marcus that spread like wildfire through the office. Stories of how he remembered the names of cafeteria staff, how he once helped a janitor carry heavy trash bags when the elevator broke, how he took the time to sit with interns and listen to their career goals. These stories became part of the company's new culture, examples that others followed. The managers who once mocked Marcus now looked up to him. They learned to measure their worth not by the weight of a badge but by the strength of their character. Some even admitted to Marcus privately that they had underestimated him. "I was wrong about you," one confessed during a late evening meeting. "I thought power was about control. But now I see it's about service." Marcus listened, not with pride, but with encouragement. "The fact that you see it now is what matters," he said kindly. "Growth doesn't come from never making mistakes. It comes from admitting them and choosing to change." The company's success soon attracted attention from outside. Clients noticed the difference in how employees worked together. Turnover rates dropped. New recruits spoke about how welcome they felt on their first day. The company's name became linked not only with security services but also with integrity and respect. For Marcus, the biggest reward was not the title or the recognition. It was the quiet moments, the receptionist smiling because she felt seen, the janitors walking with a bit more pride in their step, the managers who now asked, "How can I help?" instead of, "Do you know who I am?" Those were the victories that mattered most. One Friday afternoon, Marcus gathered everyone in the main hall once again. This time, the atmosphere was different. People weren't nervous or uncertain. They stood with pride, waiting to hear their leader speak. Marcus looked out at them, his heart full. "When I first arrived," he said, "I saw many people who worked hard but felt invisible. I also saw others who carried themselves with pride but forgot what real respect looks like. Today, I look at all of you, and I see a family. We are stronger because we see each other as equals. We are better because we know respect is worth more than a badge." There was a long, heartfelt applause. Some clapped with smiles, others with tears in their eyes. The managers who had once doubted him clapped the loudest, not out of duty but out of genuine admiration. That day, Marcus left the hall knowing that the lesson had been learned: arrogance can make you feel untouchable, but true leadership is measured by how you treat others. His story became a quiet reminder that no matter what badge you wear, your real worth comes from the respect you give and the kindness you show. The company moved forward stronger than ever. And behind it all was Marcus, a man who had once been overlooked but had proven that dignity, humility, and respect could change not just a workplace but the hearts of the people within it.